could not come within 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit of the temperature needed to melt steel. In response to this debunking by the 9/11 Truth movement, Popular Mechanics has accused the 9/11 movement of creating a straw man, which it could easily knock down. It implies, in other words, that no defenders of the official theory had ever said that the buildings collapsed because their steel melted. But the falsity of this claim is illustrated by the BBC special. It has also been much more recently by Lee Hamilton, the vice chair of the 9/11 Commission, while he was being interviewed by Evan Solomon of the Canadian Broadcast Corporation. Hamilton, saying that the Commission rejected the view that the buildings were brought down by explosives, said, "What caused the collapse of the buildings was that the superheated jet fuel melted the steel superstructure of these buildings." Hamilton's astounding statement suggests that the 9/11 Commission, while endorsing the government's theory that the towers collapsed because of the impact of the airplanes and the resulting fires, did not even discuss such elementary facts as the melting point of steel and the maximum temperature of diffuse hydrocarbon fires. The definitive report on the destruction of the towers was supposed to be provided by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. But its report, in spite of its thousands of pages, is far from definitive. Journalists have typically assumed that because the NIST report is based on the work of scientists, it is a scientific report. One of the main problems with the report, however, is that its conclusions are radically at variance with the work of its own scientists. For example, NIST suggests that the steel columns in the core of the towers buckled because they were heated up to 1,000 degrees Celsius, over 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, at which point they would have lost 90% of their strength. NIST's own scientists, however, reported that none of the recovered steel had reached temperatures over 250 degrees Celsius, 480 degrees Fahrenheit. And these were columns around the perimeter of the building where there would have been more oxygen. The 47 core columns would have not gotten even that hot because so little oxygen was available in the core of the buildings. So although NIST claims that the towers collapsed because their core columns reached 1,000 degrees Celsius or 1,800 Fahrenheit, studies by its own scientists show that the core columns could not have been even 1/4 that hot. As this example shows, the NIST report on which Popular Mechanics and much of the press has relied is not a scientific report. It is a political document put out by an agency of the Bush administration. Equally unempirical is the treatment by NIST and Popular Mechanics of reports of explosions before and during the collapses. Both documents pretend that there were no explosions, even though the last time I checked Google for testimonies of explosions in the World Trade Center, I found that there were close to 300,000 items. One of those items is an essay I wrote entitled Explosive Testimony, which quotes 41 people, including firefighters, emergency medical workers, employees of the World Trade Center, and journalists, reporting that they witnessed what seemed to be explosions. For example, Wall Street reporter John Bussey. You all know the Wall Street Journal, that left-wing rag. Its reporter John Bussey said, "I looked up out of my office window to see what seemed like perfectly synchronized explosions coming from each floor, one after the other, from top to bottom. The floors blew to pieces." Another item on the internet is an essay by Canadian professor Graham McQueen, which shows that even if we restrict our focus to members of the New York Fire Department, we have 118 testimonies suggestive of explosions in the towers. NIST and Popular Mechanics, however, right as if these testimonies did not exist. Nothing better illustrates their wholly unempirical, unscientific approach. This unempirical approach is reflected, moreover, in journalistic accounts that rely on these official and semi-official reports. For example, Alexander Cockburn, in assuring his readers that members of the 9/11 Truth Movement are nuts, said, "People inside who survived the collapse didn't hear a series of explosions." Cockburn thereby revealed that he had not studied the evidence enough to be aware of one of the best-known testimonies by a person inside the towers, North Tower employee Teresa Valise. She said that while she was making her way downstairs, there were explosions going off everywhere. I was convinced that there were bombs planted all over the place, and someone was sitting at a control panel, pushing detonator buttons. There was another explosion, and another. I didn't know where to run. As Cockburn's embarrassing essay demonstrates, journalists cannot safely rely on reports written to support the official conspiracy theory. They need to get empirical about 9/11. NIST and Popular Mechanics, besides dealing with testimony about explosions in an unempirical manner, do the same with regard to reports that molten metal was found under the rubble. The scientists at NIST, unlike Lee Hamilton, knew the fire could not have melted any steel. So their preferred method of dealing with this problem was to ignore or even deny the reports. John Gross, one of the chief authors of the NIST report, was captured on film while he was making a public presentation, saying that he knew of absolutely no eyewitness who has said there was a pool of molten steel. Popular Mechanics cites a professor's claim that the photographs said to show melted steel really show materials that appear to be other than steel, such as glass with unmelted steel rods in it. Popular Mechanics then quotes triumphantly this professor's observation that glass melts at a much lower temperature than steel. However, the evidence for molten steel under the rubble was neither non-existent nor based merely on photographs. There were many eyewitnesses, including Peter Tully, president of Peter Tully Construction Company, which was involved in the cleanup. He said that he saw pools of literally molten steel at the site. The same was reported by Mark Loiseau, the head of Controlled Demolition Incorporated, and also by Fire Captain Philip Rivolo, who said, "You'd get down below and you would see molten steel, running down the channel rails like you're in a foundry, like lava." Although these and many other eyewitness testimonies exist, NIST writes as if they did not. Nevertheless, surely knowing that they do, NIST has suggested, in a document put out in 2006 entitled Answers to Frequently Asked Questions, that even if there was some molten steel in the rubble pile, it was more likely due to the high temperature resulting from long exposure to combustion within the pile than to explosions. Popular Mechanics expanded on this incredible explanation, saying, "The debris pile sat cooking for weeks, with the materials at the bottom of the pile getting increasingly hot because the fires were confined and lost minimal heat to the atmosphere. As a result, the fires could have easily reached temperatures sufficient to melt steel." This is amazing. If you remember high school physics and chemistry, hydrocarbon fires require oxygen. According to NIST and Popular Mechanics, however, the fact that the fires were not exposed to the atmosphere did not extinguish the fires, it allowed them to get hotter. Indeed, over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit hotter. This is what passes for science at NIST and Popular Mechanics these days. According to the official conspiracy theory, the Pentagon was struck by American Airlines Flight 76